Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Again, it's great to be here to be talking about this. Those of us who've been working in the space for a long time, it's really exciting. And when I think about what should be measured, and in the context of this, I like this construct of the exposome. And coincidentally, this first released in the literature by Christopher Paul Wild about the time that Dr. Collins envisioned his notion of what it is that we should do. And what is the exposome? It's essentially the entire life course exposure to the things that might influence gene-environment interactions, including lifestyle factors, all the things that could happen that could make things a problem. I'm stuck here now. This is not working. There we go. And in light of this, again, it really is worth emphasizing this Gene Environment Initiative that was stood up by Dr. Collins back in, I'm sure the proposal for this was probably 2004, 2005. It all started in 2007, and Santosh Kumar and I were two of the fundees, the grantees in this. And it really is important to note that we're not just talking about recreational grade and mobile things that are being sold by companies. We spent a lot of time over several years really perfecting the methods and the technologies that we now present to you as researchers interested in doing this work. And again, I think this important backdrop. This was over $75 million invested in over 50 projects, and quite a success, I might estimate. So what has this given us? This has given us greater precision on measures of physiological parameters that can aid in monitoring treatments and treatment response and outcomes. And this is actually very important. Dr. Rory Collins asked yesterday, does this give us data on anything other than exposures? And yes, it does. The precise 24/7 continuous measurement of things at this physiological level can essentially provides traces, sort of arcs of the history, the natural history of what happens with, as Peter mentioned, every particular person that you might be interested in studying. We never had that before. It was always based upon self-report, so we can actually understand what's happening with respect to treatment and treatment response and outcomes based upon the questions that we might ask. Greater precision measures of behaviors and related health states. My work has focused a lot on physical activity over the years, sedentary behaviors becoming something quite important. Overall movement patterns are very important. So this notion of what it is that might relate to the trajectory of movement, condition or disease pattern. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Is that better? Okay, I apologize. I don't have the kind of voice that projects. I'm sorry. So this notion of measuring behaviors, again, extremely important. Any particular problem might have its own unique signature or fingerprint, if you will, and we now have the ability to assess that. And it's not just one sensor. It's a variety of sensors and the fusion of the data from these sensors that allows us to accomplish that. We talked yesterday a lot about this, and I want to emphasize this notion of the importance of place in health and the whole notion of the social determinants of health. That is an important critical background for what it is that we're talking about with this cohort. And just like everything else, we have typically measured these things with respect to broad indicators, broad social indicators, broad things of surveys that could be done, or economic indicators. This has changed. We now have the ability to truly understand where people live, where people work, where people play, what they're exposed to. So my project in the Gene Environment Initiative, the Personal Activity Location Measurement Project, took on the challenge of accelerometer, heart rate, other forms of data, matching that with GPS data. We used very precise separate GPS devices, but now we can use GPS data from the phone to really put people on the map and get an understanding of where people are and where they go and what they might be exposed to. And again, this picture is from a Nature article on this, and we actually have over 131 users of this on 5 continents in the world now. 54 different research labs are using this particular system to help inform some of the work that they're doing. So I would call this a real success of the Gene Environment Initiative. Importantly, additionally, we have the ability to assess experience and subjective states. We're never going to get away from the notion of needing to ask people how are they feeling, what's going on with them on that particular day. So using a mobile device to ask a question, to get a quick, simple response is something that we can do, and the methods of this have been perfected, just as Bill mentioned, the PROMIS system and others. So we can do this on the fly in real time from individuals, and we can do it in a deep way, and we can do it in a light way. And doing it in a light way is some of the stuff that I've done in some of my interventions related to obesity, successively asking people questions about things and shaping the intervention that they receive in the context of the questions that they get so that the intervention gets better and better and better. We haven't talked much about this, the notion of social interactions via online social networks, searches, and other sorts of things. Again, when we think of the cohort, it's only 1 million people. These networks serve tens of millions, hundreds of millions, literally billions of people. But we will have the ability to mine these data and figure out how our people are doing compared to others. And the social network analytics strategies that are out there are truly extraordinary as far as providing insight into health-related states. Environmental exposures, commented yesterday about the fact that this may not be quite as far along as we want it to be, but it has really moved pretty substantially. So we have the ability to understand the influences of particulate matter, noise, electromagnetic fields, and other environmental toxins, and to understand this through both wearable sensors and the ambient sensors that Peter mentioned. There are lots of things out there in the environment that, when combined with mobile technologies, give us a really good understanding of what it is that might happen. And this is actually important. We can tailor these measurements based upon what might happen to this cohort over time. Imagine a natural disaster. Imagine a 9/11, something like this that could be a real insult that we want to know the impact of that. So we can factor that in. And I just give an example of a project that we've worked on, the CitySense project, an NSF-funded project, where we're talking about participatory sensing for air quality. And this allows us to use an air pollution sensor, a portable sensor, to capture carbon dioxide, NO2, ozone, humidity, et cetera, bring this up into a mobile phone in real time, provide somebody with a real-time reading of the air quality where they are at that moment, give them some details on that, and moreover, bring these data back up into the cloud. And as a researcher, we can then understand the trajectory and path of exposure that that person had. We're still working on developing this, but this is an example of the kinds of ways that we can assess environmental exposure and factor this into the equation of gene expression and the problems, the questions that we might raise. So finally, these devices can support recruitment and retention in precision medicine research, and I think Santosh is going to talk a little bit more about this. But this notion, we can partner with the telecoms, we can partner with Peter, we can partner with others, and track and not lose people. It really is going to be important to engage in and not lose people if we're going to be investing time and effort in getting measures on them and studying them. And so this whole notion of using reminders, using engagement strategies, social networks, other sorts of things. Again, we do this in my work, so all of us working in this field of mobile health are getting better and better at this, and again, it's an exciting thing to bring to the table for us as we move forward with this. So the recommendations, I mentioned this yesterday, but this came from our committee. We have this recommendation with respect to everybody in the cohort. We think this will be important to work and drill down into the details. Everyone should have a smartphone, and everyone should wear a smartwatch. These are relatively lightweight technologies. Peter talked about the penetration of smartphones. So the things that a smartphone can give you, movement, location, ecological momentary assessment, voice and sound, image, these are data that can be stored and can be used depending upon the questions that are asked. One can capture these data, bring them in, and use them. The reason to wear a wristwatch is to capture movement that a phone might not capture, and to be able to be worn 24/7, because sleep, as we all know, is a pretty important dimension of health, and sleep can be an indicator of treatment response and problems, and a signal of problems early on. So this notion of, it's also something on the body that can capture heart rate better than the current technologies that we have now from a phone that might be in some way distant. So the two of these things, capturing continuous data from the individuals in this cohort, could provide a wealth of information for us with respect to understanding, again, the natural histories and the trajectories of how these people go. Other things over time would have to be factored into this based upon what the research questions are. So we obviously will have several areas that we would want to look at and dig into, but again, we think it's too burdensome to think of capturing all of that from people in a continuous way. So again, the recommendation across the broad population, and then drilling down otherwise. So happy to answer questions at the end. I think I'm on the yellow light now.